We can even go and look for external sources and external information that usually the analysts need to go through, get them all together, summarize it in a digested way so that the analyst at the end of the day can make better decisions and spend less time looking for all that information.
Today we're going to talk about anti-money laundering and machine learning and artificial intelligence. And honestly, anti-money laundering has been somewhat old business, meaning we have been doing, anti-money laundering technology for a very long time and using pretty traditional methods. And these days it feels like AI is moving so fast. And we're kind of catching up, well, all of us are catching our breath, but especially I would say in some areas of compliance, we are dazzled by the speed of AI, but we're also struggling as to how to adopt it to our world. We know the criminals using it, but as compliance professionals, it's a struggle because we have to be very cautious and careful. So I wanted to talk to you about some of our challenges and what we're thinking for and see what kind of solutions there are out there and how we can approach that. So first of all, let's just talk in general. In what ways, in what ways can we use machine learning to help with anti-money laundering?
Exactly. So, and it's, as you were saying, there's the compliance scenario, right? We have, in this industry, we need to follow very specific rules, compliance, and machine learning by nature, or artificial intelligence by nature is very probabilistic, right? So as soon as we think of applying AI to this use case, we need to be very careful about the applications, right? Because we cannot just, rules that need to follow, and we cannot just apply machine learning and AI as we do in other domains, for example, for fraud. So what we're trying to really achieve is to make the work of analysts, AML analysts, to be as easy as possible and leverage AI and, of course, lately generative AI for those use cases. And we're trying to understand and work with people like you, right, to understand what are the priorities where AI can actually make a difference in this, and try, as you said, try to bring this very modern technology to something that looks like we're still using old methods, right?
Yeah, I would say traditionally we use rule-based systems, so we have rules. And those rules typically start as regulators and industry bodies will issue recommendations for typologies and red flags. And so those are pretty easy to translate to rules. Some rules are a little complex, but mostly you can say, if the typology structuring is just below the reporting threshold, you can write a rule that looks for activity just below the reporting threshold. When we think about using AI, it starts to get complicated. How do we make sure we are covering the right typologies? What are some ways we can handle this? Like, can we do better than the rules, but still be able to show that we are covering the important risks?
Exactly. So in this case, if we have rules that need to be there, right, they need to be triggered every time a certain condition is met, we might as well just have those rules, right? Like we can create AI models that maybe could even do better in some sense than those rules. But if there's any one case where the model does not trigger, because it's probabilistic again in nature, then there'll be a problem, a compliance problem. So we need to have those rules, and in these situations, they already exist. What we can try to do with AI is to improve how we deal with the alerts from those rules, right? So one of the things, an easy thing that we can do first is, okay, those rules are generated, are triggered, and the analyst needs to decide which ones they should focus first. So maybe we can use AI to help the analyst to prioritize the alerts that come from the rules, right? So and having optimize the order that the analysts look at the rules, and maybe this one is a more priority one, and we can do this based on also past alerts and using, let's say, historical data, right? And we can match and use AI to learn from previous decisions, previous workflows from the analysts.
So we would use the machine learning not to generate the alerts in the first place, but to prioritize them and maybe even eliminate the false positives. But one challenge I'm thinking of when we want to learn from the past actions of the analysts is, unfortunately, in anti-money laundering, we don't have a lot of clarity on what the end outcome was. So, in AML investigations, there's an investigation, there might be a case. If it looks very suspicious, it will result in a suspicious activity report to the government. But that is not necessarily confirmed that there was or wasn't a crime. That is just a certain degree of suspicion. And activity can look suspicious and not reach a SAR, and activity can reach a SAR and not having been money laundering. And the feedback from the government is limited at best in terms of which ones resulted in a true case. So how can we learn from analysts' behavior under these limitations?
So this has been traditionally one of the challenges of applying AI in AML, right? Which is the lack of labels. So in AI, usually the traditional way to create models is what we usually call supervised learning, right? So we use historical data and we have some notion if the data or that we're trying to classify as a label, right? So if it's either suspicious or not suspicious and so on, right? And that's something that is always limited in the AML world, right? So using supervised learning, it's always a limitation. So what we can do when the cases where you have is like, say, maybe we don't know if this case was actually a criminal activity or not. We just know maybe we have some information about it was suspicious or not. So we can use that to, again, help prioritize the alerts that the analysts faced. Otherwise, so if we go beyond the traditional classification, we can try to use AI to just help the analyst in the analysis they need to do, right? We know that, okay, they got the alert, now they need to fully investigate that case, right? They need to look for extra information. Maybe they will look through huge amounts of fields and bits of numbers and so on. So we can leverage AI to help the analysts either to provide the most relevant information that we know can be important for that case. So you can find anomalous patterns in the data. We can even now, leveraging more recent technology, maybe even summarize what is there. If the analyst needs to look for external information, why don't we just bring that external information directly to the analyst? So that's, for example, one of the things that we're looking at is just improving the workflow of the analysts when they're looking at the case and trying to automate much of that work through, for example, an AI agent that can identify the important bits of information, maybe summarize it to the analyst, and if external information is needed, automatically go find that information and present it in an easier way for the analyst.
So we're looking at both optimizing the alerts themselves in terms of prioritizing, but also if an alert needs to be investigated, giving the analyst more support, more tools, so they don't have to maybe spend as much time on that, and they also can make a more confident decision. They may be making a more correct decision on that. We all hear about machine learning and AI so much, and we really want to use that in AML. But honestly, it's a little bit confusing sometimes as to what exactly we mean by machine learning and what are the ways that we can use it specifically in AML and how would that work. Can you help me understand more about the types of machine learning and artificial intelligence and where they would apply to the AML world?
Yeah, of course. So we could use AI and machine learning in different ways for AML, right? There's different types. When people talk about AI, there's different types of AI techniques that we can use. So to start simple, the traditional technique is usually called supervised learning, meaning that we use AI to learn from past information, for example, from analysts. So you could think in the case of AML, if we have the knowledge of past cases with the notion that they are suspicious or not, so based on the activity that analysts have done in past cases, we can use supervised learning, for example, to help prioritize which alerts or which cases the analyst would look for. So we need past information. But that's also, as you know, not always available for all use cases in AML. So we can also try to use unsupervised learning, which is we don't need these notion or these what we call labels, the notion of something was suspicious or not. So for example, in AML, we could use this for peer grouping, right, or network analysis. So we don't need to know the details about if a given case is suspicious or not, because we're looking for abnormalities in the network. And finally, now we also have generative AI, right? Like the new kid in the block, which is all about generating new content, not trying to classify or to predict anomalies. And so in there, we can help, for example, the work of the workflow of the analyst. So we can generate summaries about the case that or the analyst is working. So highlighting the most relevant information in a way that hopefully makes the work of the analyst much easier. We can even go and look for external sources and external information that usually the analysts need to go through, get them all together, summarize it in a digested way, so that the analyst at the end of the day can make better decisions and spend less time looking for all that information.
So it sounds like there's a lot of different ways that we can use machine learning potentially to help us with the AML processes. One thing that's always a concern in the compliance business is that even if the machine learning works, as you're explaining it to me, it's difficult to understand. And honestly, it's difficult sometimes, I think, for the regulators and the examiners to understand. And in compliance, it's very important not just that it works, but that we can prove that it works and that it works appropriately to the risk that we're trying to address, that it is an appropriate risk-based approach. And honestly, that's causing a lot of fear in the AML industry. How can we have the evidence that it works and not just believe, have faith?
No, exactly. So it's important to use AI in a trustful way, right? People need to trust the usage of AI. And that's something that we really care about and try to do. So at the end of the day, AI will not make the final decision, right? We're using AI to get quicker to a more informed decision, to get information altogether that will take a lot more time for the analyst to look for. But at the end of the day, the decision still needs to be made with the analyst. And what we try to do with AI is not just trying to get the best algorithm or the most sophisticated algorithm. We just want to use the right algorithm in a responsible way, which means that we should know and we should use algorithms that we know how they work. They are transparent to the end user, what kind of decisions, what kind of predictions that algorithm is doing. That algorithm should always also be able to provide explanations. So explainability is a very big, important part of AI that sometimes is a bit overlooked. But if the algorithm that we use or the AI model that we're using is saying something or giving a summary, or maybe saying, oh, you should prioritize this case instead of the other, we should provide an explanation so that the analyst in this case can actually understand and trust that the model is actually helping. Even if, again, because no model is perfect, even if the model sometimes may not be giving the best or the right prediction. Right? So being transparent about how the model works, making sure that the user knows there's a model actually doing some kind of prediction or suggestion, providing an explanation, making sure that the models that we actually use for this has been widely tested, have gone through different teams. So like me as an AI researcher and practitioner, I may create a model, I may make sure and evaluate the quality of the model in different metrics, but I always need someone like you, right, to actually look, see the decisions and tell us like, no, this is exactly what is important, this is exactly what is relevant to the end use. So having the specialists in the domain involved in the whole development of AI is what makes you trust and use AI in a way that, okay, it's not just a machine doing something that we have no idea what's about.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, it's a lot more than the analyst, because we want to support the analyst in the investigation, but like, to be honest, compliance officer, they need to worry about being able to show this to their examiner, to their auditor. When they do a model validation, they need to be able to show that the model is working as designed and that it, how it's operating. So that's really helpful, like being able to trust an AI model, that it is something that will make it through the regulatory scrutiny, is really key, because otherwise, even if it's an excellent model that gets great results, it's very difficult to use in a compliance context, right?
Exactly. So the model always needs to be followed, and during development and during deployment, with a very well-defined governance process, right? And at the end of the day, we need to have what sometimes is called a model card in the industry, which means that like kind of a document that tells you everything about the model, like how it was created, which data was used for the model, what is the model, what are the explanations for its decisions. So all of these things that are needed for regulatory reasons, and even more important in the AML domain, so that again the end users or the users that benefit from the AI models can trust and use it to their advantage.
So these days we are all, I feel like, obsessed with Gen AI. We've all seen the chat GPT and all this, we're seeing the Gen AI everywhere. You're shopping, you're online, you're searching, it's giving you suggestions, summaries. So everybody knows this. In terms of the adoption into, the professional compliance departments, I think we're generally not there yet. So what are some of the ways that we can now apply this exciting technology to AML compliance?
Yeah, generative AI is super exciting, and there's lots of opportunities and a lot of things to do, which also makes it super important for us to decide where does it make more sense to apply generative AI, right? Where are the key problems that we're trying to solve, and not just using generative AI because it's exciting, right? So and what we see, so generative AI is all about generating new content, right? It could be text, can be other types of things, but here what we can leverage generative AI in the AML use case is to help increase the productivity of the analysts, right? To make their life easier and getting all the things that they need to do. Sometimes that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. If you can at least partially do that thing for the analyst, it makes the analyst more productive, allow them to make a more informed decision, and hopefully quicker, right? So one of the ways we see very good prospects for generative AI in AML is like to create AI agents that are able to do a lot of the work and the effortful work that the analysts need to do. And sometimes the analyst needs to look at lots of data, either from the data in the case or external information. So if you can summarize that data, highlight the ones that are most relevant, maybe more suspicious, if we can even source external data and present it in a very easy way for the user, we hope that we can make this AI agent, make the work of the analyst much faster and get at the end of the day to a more informed decision. So I think we see a lot of potential in this.
I mean, honestly, I think it's not just about making it faster. I think it can make the analyst decisions better. As humans, there's a thing we call alert fatigue, where they just have to process so many alerts with so much information, and the human brain just can't keep up with it. And having that in a more summarized and format with the right things highlighted is something that can really improve, I think, the quality of the output, not just the speed of the process, and basically have better compliance as well as more efficient compliance.
Exactly. But we also want to make sure, again, you see, it seems like now generative AI is everywhere, but we want to make sure that we deliver this in a very careful and tested way, right? We have some experiences in the past, even before generative AI was a big thing, that we try to provide. I'll give you an example to some analysts. We did a test where some analysts were making decisions or reviewing cases just by looking at the data that we provided, and also the data plus explanations, or summarize, or trying to help the user with like summarize or explanations. And what we saw is that sometimes when given these extra explanations, if they trust explanations and they're not very good, the performance of the analyst, so the quality of their work, decreases, which is very paradoxical, right? Because the explanations look trustworthy, but if they're not good, they may lead the analyst to do the wrong decision. So we want to make sure that when we create these AI agents that gather the information and provide explanations and suggestions to the analysts, that they are very of high quality, very well tested, so that we make sure that we're actually helping the analyst and not just saving time and, as you're saying, producing worse results.
Yeah, now that you're talking about quality and testing, one of the things that it is actually a standard part of AML operations is quality control, not on the model or the system, but on the analyst. So there's usually a quality control team that will sample some of the analysts' work, the alerts and the cases, and evaluate if the work is done right. And we can actually apply similar approach to the model, if the model, to have a sample that will be reviewed by humans so that they can make sure that the model is continuing to perform as intended. And then if there's a deterioration in the performance, they can address it quickly. It's not that AI will replace the human team members, it's that they will work together to get a better result.
This is exactly my perspective as well. We don't see AI and generative AI as someone that will just replace jobs or replace people. It's actually going to augment their potential, right? The way they work. And as you said, it can be just providing more information in a way that is quicker and better presented to the user, can be helping identifying problems in the way or in cases that they worked before. So it's really finding the right way to complement the users.